In the previous session, we have discussed the different types of research. Next, now move on to the next topic, that is the steps in the research process. This is the flow chart which is given to explain the research process. There are 7 steps involved in the research process. I'll just briefly highlight on the flow chart of research process. The first step is defining the research problem. Second step is review of literature. Third step is formulation of hypothesis. Fourth is designing the research, which also includes sample design. Fifth step is collection of data, which is execution of the research. Sixth step is analysis of data, which also includes testing of hypothesis, if any. Why it is if any? Because not all research studies, they aim at formulation of hypothesis and testing of hypothesis. There are few studies which are done without hypothesis also. If at all, if the hypothesis is formulated in the third step, that is tested in the analysis phase. Then after data analysis, the 7th step is interpretation and report writing. So these all are the 7 steps which are involved in the research process. This is a typical flow chart which is normally followed in almost all type of research studies. Of course, in few research studies, overlapping of the steps will happen, or sometimes a few steps will be missed. So straight away the further steps will be carried out. And there are 2 more processes. One is feed loop. There are 2 loops shown in the figure. This is one loop called as feed forward loop. That is, the information is provided from this stage to the analysis stage. Defining the research problem, the information after problem definition, at every step the feed forward information is given to all the 7 stages. Feedback, after completion of every stage, reviewing back with the help of the feedback process that is carried out. So these are the 2 loops. F stands for feedback, which helps in controlling the subsystem to which it is transmitted. Feed forward serves as the vital function for providing criteria for evaluation. So all these 7 steps will be explained now in detail under separate headings. So research process, it will first start with formulation of a research problem. As I've said, the first and the foremost step in the research is formulation of a research problem, or identification of the problem and defining the research problem. That is the basic step of the research process. Essentially, there are 2 steps involved in formulation of the research problem. One is understanding thoroughly the nature of the problem, and second is rephrasing the same into meaningful terms from an analytical point of view. I'll repeat it once again. There are 2 steps involved in formulation of research problem. One is thoroughly understanding the nature of the problem. The researcher will try to understand the nature of the problem thoroughly, and then they put the problem in the form of a statement. The statement which is in operational terms or which is in analytical terms. So these are the 2 basic steps involved in the research formulation. And we'll talk about the first step. The best way of understanding the problem is to discuss with one's own colleagues or with those having some expertise in the matter. For example, if it is an academic research, then the help of the guide or guide will assist in problem definition. If it is a business problem facing an organization, then the nature of the problem will be thoroughly understood by the researcher by interacting with the authorities of the organization. They could be managers or employees or top level executives in the organization. Thoroughly conducting the investigation and trying to understand, discussion with such type of people the researcher will do in order to come out or in order to understand the nature of the problem. So the best way of understanding the problem is to discuss with one's own colleagues or with those having some expertise in the subject matter. So normally discussion with colleagues and the experts, the other experts who are having the expertise in that particular subject matter can also be consulted in order to understand the nature of the problem. The researcher must then At the same time, examine all available literature. You know, in the process I have explained, there is two-way flow of information between these two steps. One is defining the research problem, two is review of literature. In order to thoroughly understand the nature of the problem, researcher will review various literature. One is review of concepts and theories. Existing concepts and theories available in journals in the form of articles, newspapers, magazines, textbooks, encyclopedia, website, all these are different sources which are looked for understanding the nature of the problem. Sometimes even review of previous research findings. If there are some similar sort of studies which are already carried out by somebody else, such type of studies will also be taken into consideration to understand the nature of the problem. So hence, in order to define and redefine the problem, the researcher will go for thorough review of literature. So that is what stated here. The researcher must at the same time examine all available literature to get himself acquainted with the selected problem. After this, the researcher rephrases the problem into analytical or operational terms. After thoroughly understanding the nature of the problem, they will clearly define the statement of the problem. They will put the problem in operational terms, in analytical terms. What is to be done in order to solve that problem? That is stated very clearly by the researcher, to put the problem in a specific terms as much as possible. So this is all about the formulation of research problem. It is said that the problem well defined is half solved. If you are clearly stating the problem, then half of the task of the research process is done. A problem well defined is half solved. So thus, it is not that easy task to define a research problem. Lot of care must be taken while defining the research problem. And if there are any errors or mistakes committed at this stage, then the further process or further steps will be carried out in a wrong way, and the research study will come out with wrong results. That is of no use for the researcher. So hence, lot of care and attention must be used while defining the research problem. The problem must not be defined too vague or too narrowly. It should be specified very clearly in operational terms or in analytical terms. So thus, the first and the foremost step in the research process is problem identification and problem definition. That is formulation of research problem. Next step is extensive literature survey. As I have said, in order to understand the nature of the problem or in order to develop working hypothesis, review of literature is carried out. For both the steps, for problem definition and for formulation of working hypothesis, review of literature is done. So we have discussed already what is hypothesis. First we will talk about extensive literature survey. What is literature survey and what kind of literature is reviewed? Researcher should undertake extensive literature survey connected with the problem. And a good library will be of great help to the researcher at this stage. They can go for academic journals, for articles, conference proceedings, government reports. There are many published reports available in the form of PDF, etc., which are e-downloadable reports, or sometimes even hard copy can also be obtained on request basis from the government bodies or government agencies. So government published reports will be there. Books are also the best source. Trade publications. Excuse me. So these all are the different sources which are used for review of literature. They must be tapped depending upon the nature of the problem. Sometimes the earlier studies, if any, which are similar to the study which is in hand, should also be carefully studied. Previous research studies which are similar to the present situation or present problem can also be reviewed in order to understand the nature of the problem. As I have already mentioned, a good library will be of great help to the researcher at this stage. So this is all about review of literature. Next is development of working hypothesis. Already I have mentioned what is hypothesis. As I have said, hypothesis is a tentative assumption which is made in order to draw out and test its logical or empirical consequences. Always a scientific research or a good research will first start with formulation of working hypothesis or development of working hypothesis. Hypothesis is nothing but it is an assumed solution. Before collection of the data, researcher will assume a solution for his or her own problem which is identified by him. He will just have a guess of why that problem might have occurred, what might be the causes for that. What could be the solution for that? So that is what the assumption which is made by the researcher in terms of a hypothesis. So hypothesis is, it is a proposition or it is an assumption, tentative assumption made in order to draw out and test its logical or empirical consequences. When we talk about hypothesis, the researcher must state the hypothesis. It should be very specific and limited to the piece of research in hand. You should not state the hypothesis in a vague way. It should be very specific, to the point, relevant to the problem in hand. So such hypothesis must be developed by the researcher. It should be very specific and limited to the piece of research in hand, related to the particular topic, relevant to the particular topic. This is what the requirement. And now we will talk about why hypothesis is needed. What is the role of hypothesis for a researcher? Its role is to guide the researcher by delimiting the area of research and to keep him on the right track. These are the two reasons why the hypothesis will be formulated. You know, when we have working hypothesis in hand, that will guide the researcher by delimiting the area of research. The boundary will be fixed within which the study is to be carried out. It will delimit the area of research. What is the scope of the research? What I have to do? What is the boundary of my research? What I am aiming at? That will be very clear when we have a working hypothesis in hand. And one more thing is, it will keep us. The hypothesis will keep the researcher in proper track or in right track. Researchers will not get deviated from the topic when they know what is their study, what is the hypothesis. It sharpens the thinking and focuses attention on more important facets of the problem. When we have a clear and a specific hypothesis, it will definitely sharpen the thinking of the researcher. Like from the hypothesis only, one will come to know what data we have to collect, from whom we have to collect, what analysis we have to make, what conclusions we have to draw from the collected data, analyzed data. All this one will understand when there is a working hypothesis. It also indicates the type of data required and the type of methods of data to be analyzed. So with the help of the hypothesis, researcher will come to know what data we have to collect and how the analysis is to be made. It is developed by, of course, there are different techniques which are used for developing the hypothesis. Hypothesis just cannot be formulated alone by the researcher. So he or she need to have thorough discussions with colleagues, experts. In case of academic research, discussion with the doctoral committee members, discussion with the guide, discussion with other colleagues, discussion with other experts should be done in order to thoroughly understand the problem and to develop the working hypothesis. And also they must examine the records, data and records. Available data and records must also be reviewed in order to develop the working hypothesis. Review of similar studies. You know, most of the times similar studies will be reviewed thoroughly because even they will be having research questions, research objectives and hypothesis. Sometimes same hypothesis can also be followed if the objectives are same. So whenever we are using same hypothesis, we need to cite it, like this hypothesis is taken from so and so study or similar sort of studies. That is also okay. So reviewing similar studies and through exploratory personal investigation. You know, sometimes exploratory research studies will also be carried out. As I have said, exploratory research studies are basically carried out to formulate the working hypothesis and for defining the problem. So exploratory investigation is fresh hand information is gathered from the marketplace to formulate the hypothesis. Like for example, I'll just give you one example of a hypothesis. Assume that the problem faced by the organization is declining sales. In the first step, the researcher has identified that the sales are declining for a particular product. So, if in order to understand that problem, review of literature will be carried out. The sales analysis, the sales reports will be thoroughly analyzed for that particular product. A few sample customers will be taken, actually they will be surveyed, and the researcher will try to know why the sales are declining, or sales representatives will be interviewed to know the root causes of the failure or declining sales, etc. So in this way, this kind of analysis will be made. Then they develop a working hypothesis. They state that sales, one hypothesis, I'll just give you one example for this particular problem. Hypothesis could be sales are declining because of poor advertising activities. On the basis of review of literature and by reviewing the similar studies, researcher will assume that the sales are declining because of this particular reason. One hypothesis is sales are declining because of poor advertising activities. Second hypothesis are sales are declining because of poor sales promotion activities. Sales are declining because of poor quality of the product. Sales are declining basically or mainly because of ineffective sales representatives. So in this way, some 3 to 4 hypotheses will be laid down by the researcher, and on each hypothesis data will be gathered, analysis is made, and whether the stated hypothesis is correct or no, that is tested through testing of hypothesis. Those all things we will discuss later, right? For now, I hope you are clear with what is a hypothesis. Hypothesis is an assumed solution or tentative solution for the problem. That is what done by the researcher. Excuse me. Now the next step is fourth step, a very important step in the research process, which is preparation of research design. Research design in simple terms is nothing but a blueprint, or it is a research design is a blueprint, or it is a structural framework or the layout which is prepared by the researcher in order to carry out the research. As before construction of a house, civil engineers, they prepare a blueprint or they prepare a layout, and that layout or blueprint is used for construction of the entire building. In the similar way, the researcher will first prepare a blueprint or a layout. It is a written document which is prepared by the researcher before conducting the research study. Even a tailor stitching a dress will prepare a blueprint. A cobbler making a shoe will prepare a blueprint. Similarly, researchers will also prepare a blueprint or a structural framework or a procedural framework which is to be followed for carrying out the research. So it's a written document which is prepared by the researcher before the start of the field work or the data collection process. So it is the conceptual structure with which research would be conducted. The conceptual structure or the framework which is described in detail, following which the research study will be carried out. The function of research design is to provide collection of relevant evidence with minimal expenditure of effort, time and money. Why research design is required? When such a blueprint or framework is in hand, then with minimal expenditure, with minimum time and effort, the research study will be carried out in a very systematic way. It also guides the researcher, like what we have to, at every step, research design will guide the researcher in conducting the research study. The preparation of the research design involves usually the consideration of the following. One is the means of obtaining the information. All these details are described in the research design. First is the means of obtaining the information. What are the sources available for collecting the information? How the information is to be gathered, that is very clearly specified. Like for example, if the researcher says that we should go for collecting secondary data, What sources the researcher has to go to in order to collect the secondary data. One is books, magazines, newspapers, websites, etc. What sources the researcher will be using will be specified very clearly in the research design. It will specify the means of obtaining the information. If it is a primary data, then from whom the data is gathered, how the data is gathered, at what time it is gathered, what is the duration of the study, everything will be specified in the research design. First is means of obtaining the information. What are the sources which are used for gathering the information? That is specified very clearly. The availability and skills of the researcher and his staff, if any. Who all are available for carrying out this type of research? What are their skills, their experience, qualification? Everything will be specified very clearly in the research design. Availability and the skills of the researcher and his entire team will be specified. Then third thing is explanation of the way in which selected means of obtaining information will be organized and the reasoning leading to the selection. That is how the data, sources are already mentioned, how the data is collected, how it is analyzed, which statistical tools are to be used for analysis of the data. Even that is specified, and how to draw the conclusions, how to make the interpretations, even that is specified in the research design. The time available for research, what time is available, duration, the entire schedule of conducting the research, when it should start, when it should end, weekly what should be the progress, everything will be specified in the research design. The time available for research, and finally the cost factors, what cost is involved in conducting the research study, and what is the budget or finance available for conducting the research. So all these things will be specified in the research design. Research design also includes sample design. Sample design, we will talk about what is sampling. There are two types of surveys. One is the census survey and the other is the sample survey. As census survey is not possible in all the cases, sample survey will be used. I will talk about what is census survey. Census survey is when you are collecting information from each and every unit in the population, research population, then such a study is called as census survey. As Government of India, it collects information from every citizen of the country in the form of a census to develop a census report. So that is every 10 years or every 5 years. So that is what called as a census survey, where each and every unit in the population will be surveyed. But that is not possible in all cases. Mostly in social sciences or in business research studies, census survey is not possible. Complete enumeration of all the items in the population is called a census inquiry. Such an inquiry, of course, it will lead to better results. When you are inquiring each and every unit in the population, the results will be highly accurate. But in practice, this may not be true because it involves a great deal of time, money and energy. And in most of the social science research studies, census survey is not practical. It is not feasible also. So hence most of the social science researchers, they rely on sample survey. And quite often we select only few items from the universe for the study purpose. Census sample survey is what? From the entire universe, few samples will be chosen, data will be gathered, analysis is made, generalizations are made to the entire population on the basis of conclusions drawn. So that is what called as sample survey. The items so selected constitute what is technically called as a sample. From the entire population, few samples will be picked, data will be gathered, analysis is made, generalizations are done, and the report will be written. The researcher must decide the way of selecting the sample. When we talk about sampling, many things will be described in the sample design. One is which method we are using for selecting the sample. There are two methods. One is probability sampling method and the other is the non-probability sampling method. Of course, in sampling chapter we will discuss in detail what is probability, and there are different methods of probability sampling, what is non-probability, and there are different methods of non-probability. So depending upon the nature of the study, depending upon the nature of the problem, objectives of the study, availability of budget, availability of time, the results, accuracy of results expected, different types of sampling methods will be used. Of course, probability sampling methods, they lead to accurate results, but they are very expensive studies. Non-probability sampling studies, of course, I cannot say that they are not accurate, but they are highly cost effective. Sometimes even they lead to the better results, but in most of the social science research studies, non-probability sampling studies will be carried out. So we will discuss in detail during sampling chapter, like what all are the probability and non-probability sampling methods. Sampling design also specifies size of the sample. One thing is sampling method, which sampling method or procedure is used for selecting the sample. Second is what should be our size, sample size. What is the population size, and what percent of a population you are selecting as a sample, whether 10% or 5% or 1%, etc. So depending upon the nature of the study. Usually 5% or 10% of the population is considered as a sample. So sampling size also we must clearly specify, like what should be the size of the sample. And sampling unit. Sampling unit is the participants or the audiences from whom we will be collecting the information. Like for example, if I am conducting a study to know the purchase of Mercedes car, the purchase of Mercedes car in Mysuru city. So all the owners or all the people who possess Mercedes car will be the sampling unit. So sampling unit is the individual or the person from whom the information will be gathered. Like for example, if you want to collect information about the taste of customers towards brew coffee, then all the consumers who are consuming brew coffee will be the sampling unit. Then next is sampling framework. Even in sampling design, we must clearly specify what sampling framework we are using for selecting the sample. Sampling framework is nothing but it is a document which is used for selecting the sample. Like a city directory, list of people in a city directory, telephone directory, or Aadhaar enrollment number, or if at all if you want to survey the students of an university, then university numbers. So these the list of university numbers, etc. So these all are the different documents. Sometimes even geographical map can also be used for sampling, for selecting the sample. So these all are the various documents which are used for selecting the sample. Which document you are using for selecting the sample, even that should be specified in the sample design. And the sampling area, like what is the area of the study? What is the area of the study? Like if your target area is Mysuru, you have to specify Mysuru district or Mysuru city. So in that way you have to specify the area of the study as well in the sample design. So this is all about research design and sample design. Put together, research design, it also includes sample design. It's a very important document which is prepared by the researcher before conducting the study. It is a structural framework or a procedural framework which is prepared by the researcher before the start of the field work. Okay. Yeah. Now the sixth step is collection of data. Collection of data. So here onwards, till the fifth step, everything was on pen and paper. There was no actual data collection or no field work involved. Now onwards, collection of data is also called as the the execution stage of the research, where from the field the data will be gathered, and hence this is very expensive stage. And any mistake or error which is committed here will lead to a huge loss for the research organization or for the sponsoring agency which is conducting the research, and hence lot of care and attention must be carried out while collecting the data. Now we will discuss in detail what is collection of data. In dealing with any real life problem, it is often found that data at hand are inadequate, and hence it becomes necessary to collect the data that are appropriate. In simple terms, I can talk about there are two types of data. One is secondary data and the other is the primary data. In most of the situations, or we can say it is always a good practice to be followed by the researcher is that they should go for collecting first available secondary data, because available secondary data is highly cost effective data. It is readily available. Sometimes we are getting the data free of cost without any charge. Sometimes we collect the data by paying some nominal fees for the published reports, etc. So hence it is always a good practice. First the researcher, they should go for collecting available secondary data. If it is adequate, if it is sufficient for solving the research problem at hand, then that is more than enough for the study. So on the basis of just available secondary data, the research problem will be solved. But in most of the social science research studies, this is not true always. That is, available secondary data might, there are various drawbacks or limitations of the secondary data, like its obsolete nature or outdated nature. The study is carried out by somebody else some time ago, and it is carried out in different about the different characteristics. We are interested in studying the consumption of a particular product in terms of unit, but the data is available in terms of money or financial terms, which is not suitable to our present requirement. In that case, they go for collecting fresh data, which is called as primary data. I hope you are clear with what is primary data and what is secondary data. Secondary data is existing data, available data, ready-made data, whereas primary data is fresh hand data, which is gathered from the marketplace by the researcher. Primary data can be collected either through experimentation or through survey method or through observation. These are the three different modes of collecting the primary data. One is experimentation. In a controlled setup, experimentation can be conducted, and few variables will be manipulated, few variables will be changed, and the impact of one variable will be studied over the other variable to predict the unknown variable. We will discuss experimentation in detail when we come to the topic of research design on experimentation. That is what called as experimentation. Experimentation is carried out in a very systematic and scientific way in a closed setup, in a controlled environment, and hence the results of experimentation are far better than the other descriptive research studies like survey or observational studies. But for collecting primary data, experimentation can be done. One more is survey method. Survey is the interviewing process, what we call personal interviews, face-to-face interaction between the interviewer and the respondent, or telephone survey. Over phone, the information can be gathered. Mail survey, questionnaire can be sent to the respondents through mail and can be collected. Now interactive surveys are also available, like polls, quizzes, e-surveys, what we call. Either through email, the questionnaire will be sent and the information is gathered, or sometimes on the website itself, the questionnaire will be hosted. So these all are the different techniques which are used recently for collecting information from the respondents. So this is what a survey. Observation. Observation is entirely different technique of primary data collection, where the researcher will sit in one corner and observe the activities of the respondents, either with their knowledge or without their knowledge. If the observation is made with the knowledge of the respondent, then that is what called as participative observation. And non-participative observation is the respondent will not know that he is being observed. Sometimes, a researcher will be observing the activities of the shoppers in a shopping mall. They act like a co-shopper. They act as if they are also the co-shoppers, and by the way of doing shopping, they observe the activities of other shoppers in the mall. So that is what what we call direct and indirect, or participative or non-participative. Of course, in data collection we will discuss in detail what all are the different types of observation. So in experimentation, the researcher observes some quantitative measurements or the data with the help of which he examines the truth contained in his hypothesis. Through experimentation, the developed hypothesis will be tested. But in case of survey, data can be collected by one or more of the following ways. I have already discussed: observation, personal interview, telephone interviews, mailing of questionnaire, that is mail questionnaire, or through schedules. I'll just talk about what is a schedule. There is a slight difference between a questionnaire and a schedule. Of course, both are data collection instruments only. Questionnaire is handed over to the respondents. Respondents, they will fill it out leisurely, and filled questionnaire will be given back to the researcher by the respondents. So that is what a questionnaire. Whereas schedule is the data collection instrument which is used by the researcher only. Researcher will verbally ask the questions and gets the responses, and he or she will fill on her own in the form. Whatever they say verbatim, that will be recorded on a paper, on a sheet or a document. That is what called as a schedule. So these are the two data collection instruments which will be used in the for collecting the primary data. Yeah. Once the researcher should select one of these methods for collecting the data, taking into consideration the nature of investigation. Also depending upon the nature of the study, nature of the problem, objectives of the study, scope of the study, scope of the inquiry, availability of financial resources, availability of time, and the desired degree of accuracy. Like for example, if the desired degree of accuracy is very high, experimentation is the most appropriate method of data collection. If the budget availability is huge, then experimentation is okay, because experimentation is very expensive compared to the other data collection methods. So depending upon the nature of the study, objectives of the study, scope of the study, financial resources or budget availability, availability of time, and the degree of accuracy expected, the different types of methods can be used for collecting the data. So this is all about collection of data. Now the next step is execution of the project. So far only the researcher will decide like which tools we will be using for collecting the data, from where the data will be collected. Execution of the project is nothing but actual implementation of the field work. The project must be executed in a very systematic manner in time. Like for example, if the survey is to be conducted, then the researcher has to clearly specify the means of structured questionnaire. He has to clearly specify, first a draft questionnaire will be prepared, and that draft questionnaire will be tested on a set of sample respondents. If it is expecting, if it is collecting the relevant information, then that questionnaire will be made as a final questionnaire, and that is used for the survey. So the survey is to be conducted by means of a structured questionnaire. Data can be readily machine processed. Nowadays, the gathered data will be processed by using machines. Pre-coded questionnaires are used. Pre-coded questionnaire is, in the questionnaire itself, codes are specified. Like for example, if you are asking a question, do you buy the rinse soap? If you are asking this question, yes or no. For yes response, code given is 1, and for no response, code given is 0. In a questionnaire itself, the codes will be specified. Such a questionnaire is called as pre-coded questionnaire. So when we are using machine for processing the data, pre-coded questionnaires will be used for the analysis of the data, which is very simple. If the data are to be collected through interviews, then lot of arrangements should be made by the researcher, like proper selection of the interviewer. Experimentation, when we talk about experimentation, experiments are carried out in a very sophisticated manner. Any ordinary layman will not conduct the experimentations. For that, experts, professionals, the one who is having the knowledge of conducting experiments are required to conduct such type of experiments. But whereas in case of a survey, if you are preparing the questionnaire, standard questionnaire, and if you give it to any layman for conducting the survey, he can do it. So that is not a big deal. But in case of experimentation, the experts, sometimes behavioral scientists are used for conducting the experimentations. Lot of arrangements will be made by the researcher while selecting the what we call the interviewers. Proper selection of the interviewers, and even after selecting, lot of orientation, training will be given to the interviewers. Collecting data from human beings or from the respondents is very difficult compared to collecting information from the animals. So doing study on animals is far easy compared to doing study on the animals, because people, they do something and they say something, and that is a very difficult part or challenging task for the researcher. So they must be trained properly, like how we have to approach respondents, how we have to gather the information, how to build rapport with the people, how to take people into confidence, and then how to gather the data. So all this is very skills which are required by the interviewer, and for that lot of training will also be given to the interviewers. Occasional field checks should be made to ensure that interviewers are doing their assigned job sincerely and efficiently. You know, most of the research organizations, they do lot of occasional field checks. Field check in the sense whether interviewers, they are doing the job correctly or not, whether they are doing it sincerely and efficiently or not. You know, sometimes resurvey is done. Same respondent who is surveyed by the interviewer will be cross-examined by the researcher, whether that person is collecting the information correctly or not, efficiently or not. So that is studied. Then the steps should be taken to ensure that the survey is under statistical control. Statistical control is the data is gathered in the required way or not, in the intended way or not, in accordance with the predefined standards or not, standards of accuracy or not. So that is to be verified by the researcher. If some of the respondents, they do not cooperate, non-cooperation, non-response is the major problem which is faced during the research. Then how to deal or how to tackle such type of respondents? You know, before going for a field interview or personal interview, a phone call will be made. Prior appointment of the people will be taken, and like at what time they are free, their availability must be checked, and then we should go for collecting the information. And the purpose of the study must be revealed to them so that they cooperate us in giving the information. So these all are some of the things which can be taken care while conducting the interview process. So all these things will happen in the execution of the project. Then 8th step is analysis of the data. Analysis of data, it requires a number of closely related operations, such as establishment of categories. So after collection of data, the data must be analyzed. Before analysis of the data, there is one more step which is called as processing of data. The data must be prepared for analysis. So that is what called as data processing or data preparation. Data processing, it involves again 3 steps. One is editing of data, coding of data, and tabulation of data. Tabulation of data. So before the data is put for analysis, it must be processed, it must be prepared for analysis. Editing of data. First we'll talk about what is editing of data. Editing of data is nothing but any mistakes in the collected data, like omissions or repetitions, irrelevant data. All such data, all such type of questionnaires will be discarded. So that is what called as editing of data. Coding of data is nothing but after doing the editing of data, appropriate codes, if the questionnaire is pre-coded questionnaire, then that is done automatically, analysis will happen automatically. If it is not a pre-coded questionnaire, then for each response codes will be given. The data will be categorized. Each response will be given a code for identification. If it is a multiple choice question, then for option 1, 1 code, for option 2, second code, option 3, third code, option 4, fourth code. If it is a dichotomous question, yes or no type of question, for yes response 1 code is given, for no response 2 code is given. So in this way, for different responses codes will be given. So that is what called as coding of data. Either numbers will be used for coding the data or alphabetical characters are used for coding of the data. So after coding, the next step is tabulation of data. The data is put in the form of rows and columns. If the researcher is going for e-questionnaire, if the questionnaire is collected in the form of a Google form, then automatically the Excel sheet will be generated for that. The data is put in the form of rows and columns. But if the survey is carried out manually, then we need to tabulate the data in the form of rows and columns. So that is what the tabulation of the data. So after carrying out all these steps, data processing or data preparation, that is editing of data, coding of data and the tabulation of data, then the data is ready for analysis. Analysis work after tabulation is generally based on computation of various percentages. Again when we do the analysis, two types of statistics will be used. One is the descriptive statistics and the other is the inferential statistics. Descriptive statistics is basically used for describing the variables. The various statistical tools which are used for describing the data are measures of central tendency like mean, median, mode, or measures of dispersion such as the standard deviation, variance, range, etc. Coefficient of variation. So these all are the different, or sometimes measures of shape like kurtosis, skewness. So these all are the different techniques which are used for describing the data. That is what called as descriptive statistics. Other part is inferential statistics. In order to test the hypothesis, inferential statistical tools will be used like regression analysis, correlation analysis, linear programming, F-test, T-test, Z-test. So these all are the different tools which are used for testing the hypothesis and for drawing inferences from the hypothesis testing. This is all about analysis of data, and in detail we will discuss all these things in the fourth module of data analysis. Then the next step is hypothesis testing. After analysis of the data, the next step is to test the hypothesis. If it is formulated earlier in the previous steps, then the hypothesis will be tested. As I have said, what is hypothesis? It is an assumed solution. Now in this step, we will be checking, do the facts support the hypothesis or they happen to be contrary, whether our formulated hypothesis is right or wrong. Hypothesis will be formulated by the researcher on the basis of his or her assumptions. After that, they go for collecting the data, they analyze the data, and through analysis, they test whether the formulated hypothesis is right or wrong. If it is wrong, then that is rejected. If it is right, that is accepted. So that is what called as hypothesis testing, and various tests are used for testing of hypothesis, parametric and non-parametric test. There are different types of test, parametric and non-parametric test. Again, it depends upon the nature of study, degree of accuracy expected, and size of the sample, etc. On the basis of that, different tools are available for testing the hypothesis. So hypothesis testing will result in either accepting or rejecting the hypothesis. Once after the hypothesis testing is done, then generalizations are made. If a hypothesis is tested and upheld several times, it may be possible for the researcher to arrive at generalizations. That is to build a theory. Normally what will happen, the researcher will go for conducting the sample survey, they collect the data, analyze the data, and then they test the hypothesis, either they accept or reject the hypothesis, and then they make generalizations. These generalizations will be made applicable to the entire population. As a matter of fact, the real value of research lies in the ability to arrive at certain generalizations. The researcher must be very good at making the generalizations. If the researcher has no hypothesis, then he might seek to explain the findings on the basis of some theory or some concept. It is known as interpretation. The process of interpretation may quite often trigger of new questions, which in turn may lead to further researches. Most of the times out of interpretation, they write the limitations of the study. They say that these are the things which are carried out in the research, these they could not do, and further researchers, they may continue with these type of research studies. So that is what the interpretation which is written by the researcher. So this is all about making generalizations and interpreting the data and drawing conclusions out of the analyzed data. So once the interpretation is done, generalizations are made and interpretations are written down, conclusions are drawn, then the next step is report preparation. Preparation of the report. So every research study will do this. Either they submit a written report or a verbal presentation, oral reporting and written reporting. There are two different types of reporting, verbal report and oral reporting. So we'll talk in brief about what is the written report and what is the format of a written report. Writing of a report must be done with great care in view of the following. The layout of the report should be as follows. That is, there are 3 sections of a written report. One is the preliminary page, second is the main text, third is the end matter. These are the 3 sections of the report: preliminary pages, main text and the end matter. In the preliminary pages, the report should carry the title of the research. What is the title of the research? And the date followed by acknowledgements, the date on which the study is carried out or the duration for which the study is carried out, followed by acknowledgements, thanking the various people who have helped the researcher in conducting the research, forward, etc. All these things will be written in the initial pages. So preliminary pages should carry the title of the report, that is what called as a title page, with the date followed by acknowledgements and forward. There should also be a table of contents, what all are the contents which will be included in the report, followed by list of tables, list of charts, list of graphs which will be there in the report. Coming to the second part of the report, that is the main text. Main text of the report should have the following parts. One is introduction. The whole background of the study will be specified in the introduction stage. Introduction, it specifies what is the statement of the problem, scope of the study, objectives of the study, research hypothesis, research questions. Everything will be included in the introduction. What are the limitations of the study, etc. All these things will be specified in the introduction part. Second is summary of findings. What all are the major findings of the study will be listed out. Then the main report. Main report, it basically talks about the discussion, results and analysis, what we call. How the data is collected, how it is analyzed, what tools are used for analysis, how the testing of hypothesis is made. Everything will be specified in the main part or main body of the report, and at last drawing conclusions out of that. This is the second part, that is main text of the report. And the end matter, at the end of the report, appendices should be enlisted in respect of all technical data. Appendices could be, you say, if at all, if you have collected some secondary data like annual report of the company, or if you have taken some pictures or photographs of the company, or if at all, if you have taken any financial statements, balance sheet or profit and loss account, all those things can be put in the appendices. The data which you cannot show directly into the main part of the report can be put as an appendix. Bibliography is the last section, list of books, journals, websites, encyclopedia, YouTube links, reports which are consulted should also be given in the end part. You know, some of the reports will also contain index, which specifies which is included in the published research report. Index will give some of the definitions or the meaning of the words which will be used in the report. So this is all about the preparation of the report. So with this, we have discussed the entire research process by the way of explaining all the 11 steps of the research process. Thank you.